Welcome back to the 67th episode of the RunToGold.com podcast. I've got a special guest with us here, Bill Rounds. He's a California attorney, specializes in whistleblower law, also privacy law, handles some criminal defense, civil litigation, and so he's an expert here for us, and he's recently put together a bank privacy report. So welcome, Bill.
Hi, Trace. How are you?
Great. Okay, so first, why would anybody want this bank privacy report?
Well, especially since, in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of changes to laws in the U.S. that affect all U.S. citizens and a lot of citizens of other countries who do business or who bank in the U.S. And a lot of those laws are kind of surprising and a little bit esoteric. People don't always know exactly what they contain. So I thought I would really do an in-depth analysis and do some research on just what those laws and what those changes are.
Good. Who exactly is accessing our banking record?
Well, obviously the bank that you bank with is going to have access to these records. I think everyone understands that. But who they share it with, I don't think most people understand that almost any federal agency or law enforcement agency can request these bank records with much less than a warrant. They don't need a warrant to do this, and then they can gather those records for whatever reason. It's not just federal law enforcement and other agencies, but a lot of marketing companies or what are called affiliate and non-affiliate companies are able to access these records as well. So anything from loan generation companies or salesmen of whatever product, of whatever vitamin C salesman is there that day, are able to access your banking records. Sometimes with your knowledge, a lot of times without your knowledge.
Oh man, how rude. Oh, I don't know if you remember one of our friends. He's an imaginary friend because he's a public defender now up in California. We went to law school with him. But I remember I'd have lunch with him, and he told me about when he was working for one of the very large banks, and he had access to all the customer records. And he was like, "Oh, I wonder how much money Tony Hawk has in his account. Tony Hawk's a skateboarder," and he could just look it up. And so you've got these banks with tens of thousands of employees and almost no controls over who can access what information. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Any snoopy little teller can pretty much bring up anyone's account records and see how much money they have, and
Sure.
Who knows what types of designs they might have. We're worried about governmental actors, but I might be just as worried about private actors too.
Right. I mean, your Bank of America teller probably isn't making a whole lot of money. And if you are a high-profile customer, who knows what other individuals have incentive to understand and know what your banking records show. And, a little Bank of America teller can get right in there and do it for who knows what they'll do it for. But it's probably not very much.
Yeah, sell it to a private investigator or... who knows what they would do it for. So when we're talking about some of these relevant laws, how exactly do you approach that in this report?
Well, I think most people understand that it was things like the Patriot Act or the Bank Secrecy Act that brought about a lot of these new financial and banking regulations or requirements to report things about your financial activities. But what I've done is I've gone directly to the United States Code, the code sections that prosecutors rely on to prosecute people under these sections, and the same code sections that investigators and other federal agencies will cite in order to get your information. So it's a little bit easier for individuals who are reading the Bank Privacy Report to just go and look up what the exact text of the law is. Let's say if they want to understand it even more on a more in-depth level. It's much easier to do that than to simply have to, if I simply cited to the Patriot Act, which is 10,000 pages. How many pages?
No, it's only, 360 or so. But over a third of it pertains to financial institutions,
Right.
which is kind of crazy.
Right.
And you've got who knows how many thousands of words in there. And I remember, our first legal research class in law school. They give you a citation, and you're supposed to figure out where to go to find this. And I mean, it could be very intimidating to somebody not trained in the law. And so it's nice how I was looking over the footnotes. You can just plug those footnotes right into Google, and in most cases, you're able to find that applicable language real quick, and then try to wrestle with this statutory language. But usually, it's a lot easier when you know what you're looking for when you go into the statutory language.
Right, and that's kind of what I've done with this, is made it easy so that if you just copied and pasted that text or just typed it in right as you see it, you don't even have to get it exactly right. You'll probably come pretty close to finding it, and it should be easier for the users.
Yeah, now, so we go over the relevant law, and then the next big section was you chose the best offshore jurisdictions. Why exactly would we be interested in going offshore, and why these particular jurisdictions that you present to us?
Well, first of all, banking in some of these offshore jurisdictions that protect privacy, those jurisdictions have laws, sometimes constitutional level laws, which protect the privacy of the individuals in the banks much more than United States banks or United States law would allow. Now, this doesn't mean that all of your information is private if you transfer money through the formal banking system to these banks from the United States. There's going to be a record of that. But once your information is in those banks, there is very little that can happen short of serious crimes, investigation for serious crimes, that will allow those banks to then reveal that banking information.
Yeah, I know with one of the banks that I deal with, I looked up the relevant applicable law, and it's actually one of the jurisdictions you don't mention, so maybe I need to go find another bank. But it provided that if they released any of my customer information, they could be imprisoned for 2 years. So this was pretty comforting. If that little snoopy teller, my friend who's not public defender, if he had been snooping around, his manager or VP could possibly be liable for criminal charges for releasing some of this information, which is almost the exact opposite that we have here in the United States, where they're liable criminally if they don't release the information under like the SARS and things like that.
Right. Now, criminal penalties for releasing bank information is common in a lot of these offshore banking privacy jurisdictions. Just because the jurisdiction that you were looking up doesn't come in the report doesn't mean it's not a good jurisdiction. I took into consideration a lot of things when I was choosing the best. One of the things was a representation of several areas of the world. So I cover Asia, Latin America, Europe. I try and spread it out that way, but I also chose jurisdictions that do have strong privacy protection in general. And that jurisdiction that you were looking up probably has almost as strong as privacy protection as the other jurisdictions I've talked about. But you can take the things that I've talked about in the bank privacy report, and if you have a question about another jurisdiction, it'll be easier for you to find what you're looking for, because you'll know what to look for when researching maybe another jurisdiction that you may have closer connections to.
Right. Now, what are some of these extreme credible threats that could be on the horizon?
What do you mean by could be on the horizon?
Well, I know, like, for example, I wrote an article about currency controls, and then you followed it up with a couple articles on Hawala systems and currency controls. So that would be one threat that I'm particularly worried about would be the introduction of currency controls, and why it would be advantageous to have some capital outside of the area that's being controlled with its currency.
Oh, certainly, and that's one of the big things that bank privacy gives you when you're using foreign jurisdictions, is you're able to diversify your asset base. If you have a bank, let's say in Switzerland or Panama, those two countries are very unlikely to have the currency controls that they're going to have in a country, say the United States or England. If you've already got enough of your capital outside of the United States before they even impose those kind of currency controls, you're going to be able to function in a worldwide economy much easier, with much more ease, and without risking violating the law, because you've already got your capital outside of that jurisdiction.
Yeah, and whether that's the U.S. that imposes the currency controls, or whether it's some other jurisdiction like Venezuela, who just devalued the bolivar and have imposed currency controls. And we actually already have currency controls here in the United States. And I noticed you put it in probably just for me about the pennies and nickels, and you take a handful of change to Tijuana, and you wanted to get a churro, and instead you get 3 meals in a bed because you got over $5 of pennies and nickels in your pocket. So we already have these currency controls, and it's just a matter of ramping them up in the U.S. And we also have them in places like Venezuela and Brazil, just impose some currency controls and other things like that. What would then be some of the, and we talked about facilitating international business. For example, I just finished a transaction. I'm in the process of closing it, and I'm having to get quite a bit of capital to this fellow, halfway around the world. And it's proving to be quite a pain in the neck because he doesn't necessarily have his international banking infrastructure built in terms of his own personal accounts. So I'm having to kind of cater to his needs in terms of getting him that money that he needs from the assets that I bought. So in addition to that, what are some of the kind of the really big Hollywood movie type issues that offshore banking can protect us against?
On the more extreme level, things you're talking about, like the Hollywood movie level, they're possible, but probably not likely for most people. Things like blackmail, extortion, political persecution, even kidnapping, and a host of other things. These are all potential threats. We even kind of mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the low-paid teller who might divulge the information about somebody who has $20 million in their account or something like that.
Yeah. They pull out their account. Oh, you got $20 million, and I know your home address, and I know your social security number, and I know all this other stuff. I know where you're spending your money. I know the gym that you work out at because you paid them.
Right, organized crime. Their new commodity of choice is information. Drug smuggling and other things, those are kind of taking a back seat to the exchange of information. So information like that this lowly teller can pull up can honestly and truly has a potential of leading to these kinds of things, kidnapping and extortion, because they have incentive to sell that information. It's really difficult in the United States to track them down as the source of this, because the information is shared among so many individuals within the banking system and with the federal government that it's almost impossible to know where the breach of security was.
Yeah, because they don't have adequate controls built into their system. Yeah, this is it's a very interesting report. I think that it's a great value for the price. Took quite a number of hours to put it together, and if you were to have your own attorney prepare something like this for you, it would be very costly. So. Oh,
certainly, and this is the kind of thing that a lot of law firms will have an associate do. They'll spend a couple days, and the firm will pay them a few $100 to a few $1,000s to put together something like this. I did it because I enjoy this kind of thing, and I know a lot of people would want this information in their hands. So I'm getting it to people at basically nothing. So
yeah, definitely a good price. So I recommend people get it. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this bank privacy report?
no, I think you're right. The pennies and nickels regulation was a gift just for you, Chris.
Just for me.
Just for you. So anyone else who reads it, you can just black that part out. That was just for Trace.
Well, we'll have to get a churro sometime. Thanks for listening to episode 67 of the RunToGold.com podcast. And please keep in mind that the bank privacy report does not constitute legal advice, and it does not form an attorney-client relationship. If you would like to form an attorney-client relationship with Bill, I'm sure he could take care of you, but that will cost extra. Thanks.
This is John Rubino from DollarCollapse.com, and you're listening to Run to Gold.